Oh no, the good thing, the good place.
Everybody's place. What order are you sitting? Yes, everybody's ready? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to our last panel today. It's been a long day, so thank you, everyone, for enduring and still being awake and still being with us. I will speak English because I think there are more people in the room who understand English than understand Latvian, and also because three of our four members of this wonderful panel are not speaking Latvian or are speaking many languages, but not Latvian. Not yet. Now you have a Latvian first lady, you have to learn, you know. So I think we have perhaps come to the most interesting part of this whole conference, and also, well, last time we had, was the opposite, so that's fine. When the discussion started about this anniversary conference and celebrating Mozaīka's 10 years, Kristīne and I, in particular, talking about it, I think we both said that, okay, we don't need another conference where we just kind of tell ourselves that things are not as good as they could be, but we need to talk about what to do about it, how to change, and what's happening in the next 10 years. So not looking back as much, perhaps we did that yesterday, but looking forward into the future, because that's where that's the only thing we can change. Our actions today, which will influence what happens tomorrow. That's what we can do. We cannot change the past. This panel is meant to be mostly about Latvia as an inspiration, as a tool, as guidelines for activists and board members and supporters of Mozaīka. But of course, even if some of our especially politicians seems to believe that we live on the planet Latvia, then we are, after all, a part of Europe, a part of a post-Soviet legacy, a part of the world. So there is a context, and I think our also distinguished members of this panel will speak about the context from different angles. If we speak about methods, what to do for the future, we've heard many examples today, many suggestions, ideas. We've heard about campaigning, we heard about referendums, we've heard about organizing marches, we've heard about secret deals with politicians, we've heard about the necessity and importance for the community to come out, to phrase our message in a human and positive way, etc. So there are many possibilities, many ways to go, which I hope is the thing that we will discuss today, or I don't know if he's sitting through the night, but Kristīne gave me another 15 extra minutes, so a while we'll be here. So starting from my left, just as a brief introduction, we have Imre Sooäär from Estonia, the Estonian Parliament, and also, as I understand, a great supporter of the 0.1 step that Estonia has taken, which is much better than we have. Then we have Yuri de Boer from the European Council. Then we have, Juris Pūce, I couldn't see. There are so many Juris here, I get confused. Juris Pūce from the Latvian party, Latvijas Attīstībai. He told me I should keep the Latvian name. And finally, but certainly not least, my dear friend, Yuris Lavrikovs, who's also one of the founders of Mozaīka. So initially, I will give you the floor. I said 5 to 7 minutes. Let's see how that works out. And after that, maybe I will have some questions, and then I'll leave the floor to you as well for a discussion. So please, let's take it in the order we're sitting. Oh, you want that order?
As you want. As you want.
As I want, wow, yeah.
You're the moderator.
Then let's start with you, Imre.
You're the moderator.
Thank you. First of all, I want to tell I'm extremely proud to be here, proud that Latvia together with the Council of Europe, has organized this conference here. I think it will definitely help the cause in whatever way, and we have to be united in the Baltic states. Alone, we are only few, but together we can really form the force. What I would like to talk a little bit about, because I don't want to tell the whole story how we did it in Estonia. It's actually, I think, available online from the last conference, and it took hours to explain. But now it's done, so I would maybe concentrate on the Estonian experience, what we have learned from it, and where you could go, where you should be headed here, maybe in Lithuania the same. What are lessons we have learned? First of all, of course, every picture has different views. And it's always how we interpret these views. And it's always a question if the glass is half empty or half full. And I totally disagree with Lisette, what she said in the morning here. And it's fine that we disagree because we have pluralism of opinions. But it's all the way how we look at things. I think we have made a major step in Estonia. Even if you compare the last parliament, which passed the bill, the initial Cohabitation Act, we had 40 votes pro, 38 against. So our parliament is 101 members, so not 50%, but 40% roughly of the parliament voted for it. Now, at the moment, we have the Implementation Act in the parliament, and the first reading of that passed 42-40. So actually 2 votes more than in the last parliament. So I wouldn't say that things have gone down. Well, things have gone actually this far that one party realized that this voting for this will not destroy your party's rating. So they presented a competitive bill on behalf of their party, calling it a, how should I translate it to English? Paarkond. Lisette, help me. What is paarkond? Paarkonna seadus. What's that in English? No, paar. It's couples law. Couple unity law. Yeah, couple unity law. Which basically says 30% the same thing as our Cohabitation Act, but it's only available for same-sex couples. The Cohabitation Act is available for everybody, so they just reduce the number of people, but they allow basically the same thing, with the exception of adoption rights and so on. But anyway, so that already shows that discussion has gone much further, and that bill passed the parliament a few weeks ago, first reading, 55 votes pro, so over half the parliament. So these kind of signs are showing me we are not regressing, but we are progressing in different fields. We just have to find a way to find equilibrium between these different opinions. Now, I think the most important thing is the communication. We have made some mistakes in Estonia throughout this process from the very beginning to now about the communication, but I think we have made also some very good things. And first and foremost thing was how to explain to the people who are, and I'm talking bigger part of society in Estonia, also probably here in Lithuania, who has 2 keywords. If you talk about homos and if you talk about sex and you add these 2 things together, it's a no-no. These are basically child abusers, as many consider them. So how to take them away from this notion and explain the people being together and the need for the legal protections by the state. So we sat down together with the former judge of the Human Rights Court of Europe and together we started to discuss how to bring this issue closer to the people. Original act actually was named Civil Partnership Law of Estonia, like it is in many countries. But we realized that the words are powerful communicators. These are carrying messages, and people are reading all different contexts from these things. And civil partnership is not connected to the family. Civil talks about something state, civil servants, something civil, it is connected to the state and not to your family. Partnership can be any kind of partnership. Business partnership, there's companies make partnership, countries make partnerships, organizations talks nothing about family and two people together. So we sat down, we went through different things, and we came up with a completely new word, which didn't exist in Estonia. And it was kooseluseadus. Living, in a very direct translation, living together law. Living together law. Cohabitation Act translated now to English. And this word, which people didn't understand first, what is this kooseluseadus? And it was something new, and they were a little bit more open to that, to find out. And that gave us a huge new start to talk about something new that takes away these preconceived notions which are connected to homo and sex. It's nothing about the sex. There's nothing written about sexual preference or anything about sex in this bill. It's purely two human beings want to be together and they want to be legally protected, whoever they are, two people, except family members. And that started a huge thing in the media because something new came about. And I bet there's nobody in Estonia now who has never heard about kooseluseadus. Everybody knows this word. They have different feelings about it, pro or contra, but they all know about it, and they knew there is a subject. And that gave us a huge kickstart. And then we came a few years later, where we are now, is we analyze what has happened and where we want to go from here. The partnership bill has been passed. The first partnerships, yes, too few, but they have been formed. There have been television stories about these happy couples who have just concluded a partnership act, and that already changes the society. And process continues in the parliament. We're not giving up, and society is step by step changing. So this is what also you have to do here, and I believe just some examples or some suggestions what Latvia should do, and also Lithuania. You have to plan your communication. How do you communicate about these issues to the people, to the politicians, to your family members, and if needed, create a Latvian word for that to bring it closer to the people, so people would connect to that and see that's something necessary. I don't believe that, like Lisetta suggested, that let's go back on the streets. Being in politics for 13 years, I see confrontation creates counter-confrontation. This is not the way that leads to the legislative acts to be really passed in the parliament. The communication and step-by-step inducing understanding, inducing acceptance amongst in discussion will lead to final results, will lead to better results. Convince it is not a political left-right issue. There seems to be preconceived notions also in Europe, but it's usually social democrats are for these kind of things, conservatives are against it. I always use a good example of James Cameron, conservative who came in front of the British Parliament and said, I support the same-sex marriage, not despite I'm conservative, but because I am conservative. Because it's not the conservative or liberal or democrat, it's an issue of basic acceptance of government has nothing to do and no way to the people's bedrooms. That's basically what it comes down to. It's your private business what you do at home. And he was able to win the Conservatives over in Britain. I think we have to do the same way. We have to put away this left-right issue from this whole discussion. And last, and not the least, is win over the prominent members of the society from the traditional families. Family people with the children, if they will start to speak up for the issue, then the whole society becomes to accept it much more. I think that was a key issue in Estonia, that we won over families with the children who started to speak up for this issue, that let's everybody accept the others who have different kind of families, but let's accept them, including the politicians. And we started in the parliament, actually, the original bill was also 6 people who dared to sign it. And many others had to overcome their personal fears in order to give that signature and to support it. It took me hours and hours of convincing, going to each member of parliament and saying, it is not going to kill your career, as was conventional thinking. If you sign that bill, you're out. The father figure, one of the biggest father figures of Estonian politics, told me, Imre, if you are taking this bill, you have to realize you will be out of politics, but it's necessary, you have to do that. Well, I got back to the parliament with twice the votes before. So it is not something that kills if you explain and if you don't go on a way of confrontation, but simple explaining. First time ever I hear there's been some kind of the last thing I say, then others will have to speak to, is first time ever I hear here that there's been some kind of a secret deal in Estonia. It's completely news to me. I've been in the parliament for 13 years, and about this subject matter, there's some kind of a secret deal I've never heard. And I don't actually also believe that. And I'm telling you, if any politician in Latvia or Lithuania also is coming to you and offering you a secret deal, it's just not realistic. It would be naive to believe this kind of thing. Because we don't have any party in our states which has a single majority in the parliament. We all have to form coalition, and whoever will promise you anything like that will have to have also agreement of the coalition partners, and practically it wouldn't happen. So don't believe in these kind of deals. So more communication, and be united, don't fight with each other, talk to your politicians, talk and explain. That's the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll proceed with the row of Juris. So Juris Pūce first.
I'm the first from the three Juris, so I hope I will be the most memorable one, but let's see. First of all, I will use a first minute to congratulate Mozaīka with the 10th anniversary, and I totally agree with Talivol this in the previous discussion. It always is good to look back a little bit over time and see how far you have gone. What happened in 2006 and what happened in 2015, and there are of course a lot of problems still to solve, but there are a lot of progress, and much of course done also from you, from your effort, from a lot of people able to speak up on the very tricky subject in Latvian society. Kristīne in the previous before the previous panel discussion said that on the numbers, how the people perceive the LGBT community, and of course we have the problem, and the problem is also in the fact that if you look back in over 10 years, there had not been a lot of actually development in that field, that we have seen a huge growth in support, but we should look also on the positive side. As Imre said, the glass is also half full. They have not seen also huge growth in negative side of the people who are becoming more aggressive towards LGBT community. So congratulations, Mozaīka, and keep up. I should also spend a minute on the past, and then the discussion is actually on the future. So concentrate on that. I think for me, personally, the initiative to pass in Latvia a Cohabitation Act was, for me, the final push was Estonia in 2014. You know, we in Latvia tend to look on the Estonians with a difficult attitude. I'm very polite nowadays. They somehow in front of us, and I thought, oh my God, they did it half a year till the election. Half a year till the election. In 2014, Latvia also had election. Estonia had in beginning 2015, but we had in 2014. Our government stopped doing anything for a year prior to the election. They didn't pass changes to the construction law. Construction law. I thought what they could do with the cohabitation, or I'm not sure. And so that was a final push for me. I understood that if they can, we can for sure. Let's see how far we are from Estonia in the time of years. I think that there will be a couple of years still time for us together to work for that to pass. How we can achieve that? I think there are 4 possible roads. And I'm starting with the less optimistic, and I'm a very optimistic person myself, and I don't believe in that. We can always count on the fact that by one point of the time, European Union or European courts will push that on us. We have seen that in the last couple of years, a couple of judgments showing the way, showing how it will be dealt in the future, and also it becoming an interestingly also a European Union matter. It wasn't prior to that. Take into account that we now have 20, if I'm not mistaken, member states of European Union who have some kind of regulation, or 21 on this matter, and by the end of this year we'll most probably have 22. That means that we will need to have some kind of recognition procedure between the countries. There will be need because of the mandate that European Union already has on inter-commerce regulation between the countries. You need to recognize, because the people move, and the movement of labor is one of the basic principles of European Union, you will need to recognize the partnerships. That is, or marriages between the same-sex couples. So it will be it's a matter of time. European apparatus, of course, is not the fastest one in the world, but they tend to produce results if they start, and I'm pretty sure that that will happen over time. But that's the least optimistic version, because it has some negative consequences, and the most negative consequences for me as a Europhile is, of course, the fact that we will again be pushed into something by those people in Brussels. The second step, which hasn't been used in Latvia, and I would suggest people who are ready to do it, it will take time, is to use courts themselves. We haven't done that in Latvia. There are a lot of issues to do it. It's a normal strategy. It takes time, actually a lot of time, 5 to 8 years if you use a Strasbourg court as a final place for your destination of that. Then there is a third way, is to bombard Latvian parliament, meaning that not in physical sense, but in the sense with the propositions and ideas. And there should be why it's matter. First of all, I don't believe in the previous panel there was a saying that only 6 members of parliament will support in previous. Is this parliament, if the Cohabitation Act will be part of it? I have spoken with actually a couple of members of parliament over the last year, more than a couple, and I believe that there will be around 15. But it is an issue of a push. There should be always a constant push for the proposals. Using Manabals, we have this online petition platform which we use to forward the idea, which is the parliament is obliged, if the 10,000 signatures are collected, obliged to look on this matter and vote in the plenary, which is a huge step in general to achieve that opportunity. And then there's, use those members of parliament who are brave enough to submit a legislative proposal, or to push for our institutions which are meant to deal with that kind of matters, like ombudsman, which we re-elected, or parliament re-elected this week, to push for proposals in that sense. And this is a constant push will create a path, and I'm sure that To be, again, I'm optimist, but also a realist in the sense it doesn't mean that we will get something by end of this year or end of year 2017, but it is possible that in 3 to 4 years something could happen because of the fact that people will not be, politicians will not be anymore such afraid to talk about that. And then there's a third way, of course, a normal political way to push for the political parties which are working in Latvia to be more open to this issue and speak about that prior to elections, be able to vote again after that in the parliament. We are a democratic country. The parliaments change all the time. And the new members of parliament come in and they vote. What is good? What is sure? I personally think all 4 roads must be taken because of the fact that only the feeling of the process, of the ongoing process, will also create a feeling for a member of the parliament sitting in not far away from here in their offices. In the parliamentary building, and maybe they want to vote in favor, but they feel afraid. They feel afraid they will lose the electorate. They feel afraid that they will get, Imre, when he was last time in Riga, said 5,000 or 10,000 emails per day because they support something like that. Some groups are very organized. They have connection to the now limited funding from the East. It gets more limited over recent years due to other aspects. But still, they have opportunities to work. And I'm sure that if there is a strong interest, all the time new proposals and the process ongoing, all those 4 roads, we will achieve. Thank you.
European Council?
Council of Europe.
Sorry. Council of Europe, yes.
Which is a minor,
yes.
unimportant detail.
Sorry, I can't believe I made this mistake after all these years. Okay. Yes. Sorry, Council of Europe.
And for those who are sitting there and thinking, okay, what's so funny? So it's the same flag. It's blue with yellow stars, but they're 2 entirely different entities. And we talked this morning a little bit about Europe. And someone said the European Union is a political and economical cooperation. It's correct, and it has 28 member states. The Council of Europe has 47 member states and is the structure around the European Convention for Human Rights, so 47 member states that have signed up the principles on human rights, and our mission as Council of Europe is to protect human rights, promote democracy and the rule of law in all these 47 states, which include Latvia. When we talk about sexual orientation, gender identity in this field, we talk about one very important political instrument or legal instrument, which is the recommendation that the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe did to the member states in 2010 on combating discrimination on the grounds of sexual orientation and gender identity. It's a very long title. I have the title actually here in Latvian, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, but it's this little booklet, and you can find some of them together with some of our other materials in the windowsill next to the Nordic Clubhouse sign. And this document sets out in 12 thematics measures that states could or should take in order to promote and safeguard human rights in this field. And these human rights don't come from somewhere, like falling out of the sky together with the unicorns. They are coming forth out of the European Convention of Human Rights and the case law of the European Court in Strasbourg, which was already mentioned. That just to keep the difference between the 2 organizations, but it also tells a little bit something about the perspective that I have in this panel and in the next panel when we try to come to conclusions about all the things we heard today about developments in Latvia and in other countries in Europe. I think that to start off, we should really underline that we are talking about one of the most persisting forms of discrimination in the 28 or the 47 of Europe. It is not a sidelined issue, it is a key issue. And it is also a very actual issue that affects many people in these countries. It is also an issue that in many countries people find difficult to talk about. There is an ongoing taboo in many countries on homosexuality, on being transgender, on being part of a minority, maybe, in general. And then, at the same time, we have this idea of a Europe of values and of safety and stability and of the democratic societies where the majority rules on the understanding that it protects minorities. So it is not a thing that doesn't really live for people. And I think we heard that earlier today, that for some policymakers this is something something difficult to come around and to understand, to grasp. And I think the work that we are doing as Council of Europe is work with governments to assist them in changing legislation and policies to meet those criteria. And it is interesting that you mentioned the elections of 2014, because between 2011 and 2013, the Latvian government and the Council of Europe, together with Mozaīka, worked on a number of issues, both on the implementation side and social policies, and also on legislative reform, to advance this recommendation. And despite a lot of good work done, and also at this point we should applaud the work done by Mozaīka in that process, we see that many of these changes did not make it through the end, probably because this was 2013. I don't want to speculate, but it's maybe a point for our later discussion. Then again, if they also had difficulties changing transport legislation at that time, I can see that there are other elements of work that have been left behind. There is another point that you made that I would like to come back to. Also looking back a little bit about what we heard about Ireland this morning, Malta, countries that by many people were not considered very open and very advanced as it considered human rights of LGBT people. And what I liked about the video clip, I'm looking for him, I can't find, there he is, Brian, showed this morning, is the work that has been done in Ireland on changing minds and hearts. I think that is a very important element to underline, that while legal changes need to be done by lawyers and people with big piles of paper and policymakers, you at the same time want to work to societies that are harmonious and inclusive. But of course legal protection comes out of laws, that you said, and you can go to courts. If you feel that your rights are violated, you should go to a court and you should find redress. And I think we see increasingly throughout the 47 member states that people who feel discriminated on grounds of sexual orientation, gender identity are taking that route. And some of these cases end up at the European Court in Strasbourg. And I think we can say that there is a trend in recent rulings by the court, where the court also really sees that this is a dynamic field in which human rights are growing, not expanding, but the interpretations of the court are becoming broader and touching upon issues that they had not touched upon before. So taking a legal route to change laws is absolutely a way to create change. And I'm just thinking about the proceedings in the last 2 years against Greece and Italy on cohabitation laws and partnerships, where we've now seen that the court has expressed itself. So the speculation that came earlier in this panel about is this going to be pushed upon us? No, it's not going to be pushed upon, but there is jurisprudence of the court that says if people are asking our opinion as a court, then on the basis of how we interpret the convention, yes, if there are legal protections for same-sex for heterosexual couples, there should also be legal protections for same-sex couples. Changing minds, changing hearts, changing laws, changing policies. Policies need to be changed by policymakers, and being one myself, policymakers don't wake up in the morning and say, okay, let's change policy. Well, we do, but it's not always how it works. You need parliamentarians to tell you what to do. You need governments to say, hello, policymakers, go and do your work. And I think there we need again to applaud Mozaīka on what it has done in Latvia, but also the other civil society organizations that spoke earlier today in Malta, in Ireland. These two countries didn't become sort of lighting beacons of inclusive policy overnight. No, that is work done by people who want to change things that needed to be changed. And I think for the remainder of our discussion, I think it is good to also look at how governments and civil society can work together. I have a lot of notes about what was said this morning, and as we're coming to the end, I see Juris going through his notes, so I'll help he said that, but that's what you did to me. I think I want to end this intervention by putting some things in a historical perspective. We talked about Ireland this morning, where Brian said it was 22 years in which we made so much progress. Mozaīka in 10 years made so much progress. I'm from the Netherlands, and until quite recently we were also considered one of these countries where unicorns run around the street. And I always explain to people that it's a process that started before the Second World War. These things don't come overnight. They take time, they take investment, they take courage. And I think on this anniversary, the courage to be visible, to demand change, and to claim respect for rights, for human rights that are universal, is, I think, key in this process. And that's where I want to pass it to the last Juris.
Okay, thank you.
Well, it's a difficult task to speak on the last panel and to speak as the last speaker, and so much has been said and so many thought-provoking ideas have been exchanged. But first of all, of course it's a day for Mozaīka to celebrate its existence for 10 years and what an existence it was. For me, as one of co-founder of Mozaīka, it's also difficult to identify how do I relate to the success of the organization. And because many things have been progressed indeed, but looking from different, maybe wearing different glasses, situation is actually quite depressing when you look at the context and the wider. And I will start maybe with a context to put back where we are as Mozaīka, where we are as Latvia in relation to LGBTI rights. My daily bread is being done, so I deserve my daily bread by working at ilga-europe in Brussels, which is the European region of the International Gay, Lesbian, Bisexual, Trans and Intersex Association. And our two major pillars of work is advocacy at the European level. So we work a lot with European Union, Council of Europe, Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and delivering issues how the status of LGBT rights can be improved, what needs to be amended, etc. But second very important pillar is community building, movement building in Europe. Europe is maybe I can ask the person in charge of the computer to click, yes. I thought I will use our Rainbow Europe project, which is bringing a summary of where Europe is in terms of the legal aspects of LGBTI rights in Europe. And as we can see, Europe is extremely divided. There are some certain trends, but as confirmed by the speakers today earlier from different countries, each country goes through their own dynamics, through their own debates, through overcoming their own particular obstacles, etc., etc. And bringing back attention, focusing back on Latvia, unfortunately, we have to notice that amongst the EU countries, we're the least developed country when it comes to the legal situation. And unfortunately, the only basic changes which happened in Latvia in terms of law, at least and policies, they came through Europe, starting with the 1992 when Latvia decriminalized homosexuality due to joining the Council of Europe. And then we all, well, maybe some remember the battle which Latvian Parliament had between the Parliament when we were implementing the directive introducing discrimination, ban on discrimination based on sexual orientation in employment. Despite the fact that Latvia willingly joined the EU, we were quite resistant in implementing the legislation, and the firstly Parliament rejected inclusions of sexual orientation. It was sent to the President. Luckily our President sent it back, and that there is no discussion about that. It's something which our membership implies. So that was passed. But that basically it. There were some minor changes in legislation related to asylum, which were also derived from the EU directives, but that's it. And I think, for me, speaking legally, it's very important. It's something which Mozaīka is working for. It's to improve the lives of LGBTI people in Latvia. And however we put it, the laws and policies and regulations are relevant to many aspects of our lives. And while today we were talking mostly about partnership, marriage, cohabitation registrations, LGBT people are, and their identity, not revolving around partnerships only. There is a whole range of issues, and this is what we're measuring progress in Europe by 50 categories, criteria, and later you can familiarize yourself a little bit. And these are the issues which LGBT people who confront on a daily basis. It's the ability of trans people to be recognized and live fully, respectfully, as in their preferred gender. It's the ability for children of LGBTI people to be free from bullying and any abuse in school just because of sexual orientation of their people. But it's also the rights of the children who are LGBTI to be free from any discrimination and bullying whilst they're attending secondary schools, etc. Its ability to be protected from aggression, which unfortunately is still happening in Latvia, like in many. It's really pan-European phenomenon when people are being beaten up, harassed just because of their sexual orientation, gender identity, or sometimes even perceived. They said somebody thinks that somebody looks like a gay or lesbian and they're being attacked. And we don't have this protection in Latvia. There are no systems, so it's very difficult for people to actually deal with these cases. And of course, as has been already mentioned, we were even up till recently struggling with a very, very basic fundamental freedoms like freedom of assembly. We can debate whether pride is good or not, it's irrelevant. You know, we all, as citizens of this country, entitled to very basic rights which are enshrined in our constitution, which somehow our society and our government, for this matter, up till a certain point was deciding that no, if you're LGBT, you don't have the same rights to march and claim public space. So legal situation is very important, and of course there is a whole range of issues which affect our daily life. When we look at the public attitude in Europe, again, Kristīne already mentioned today about the poll which Mozaīka conducted. But if we look at the EUROPRIDE results, which is something which the European Union is conducting every 5 years, looking at the social attitudes in the European Union countries, again, Latvia is the least accepting country for many years towards LGBTI people. It's quite horrifying to see how many people would have problem with a politician or president of the country if they would be from the minority, not just LGBTI community. Kristīne mentioned how many people would actually act upon against member of their family because they're LGBTI. So there is a lot of work to do, not just on the legal front, but also on social. I think it's very important, and which we maybe didn't speak too much today, is the context in terms of the Russia and its influence and impact on what's happening in the Latvian politics. I think it's a question not just for Mozaīka, but for the Latvian society generally, is it seems like we're still struggling to decide which direction do we actually want to take in a way, what kind of country do we want to build. We're seeing more and more influence of the Russian propaganda in many ways in Latvia, and the recently introduced changes in the education law, it's clearly influence of the Russian gay propaganda law in Latvia and the other initiatives. We have also serious problems with the political system in Latvia because we don't have those traditionally political forces which are on the front run on defending LGBTI human rights. I mean, Liberal Party, well, we know the answer. Social Democrats, or at least people who claim to be Social Democrats in Latvia, we know who is behind those, that party and what is their agenda. So what Imre already mentioned, so Mozaīka needs to be really creative, indeed, in terms of building alliances with all spectrum, political spectrum. And in a way, maybe it's not such a bad idea, because indeed we're talking about very universal values, values which should be embraced by all the political parties, because in the end we're talking about valuing our own citizens and their dignity and their welfare. And of course the European context, which is becoming challenging and complicated recently as well. If before, if we're looking 15 years ago, there was a very clear liberal window in the European Union through which a lot of changes actually happened in Europe, at least at the European level. Now it's becoming much harder to rely on this, particularly within the EU context. The EU is in a crisis on so many levels, with a refugee crisis, with the economical crisis, and human rights are becoming less and less important, and we're seeing in Brussels that it's becoming challenging for us to identify who exactly do we need to talk in Brussels and how do we need to talk, what kind of argumentation we use. Intention is somewhere else. Council of Europe is a very different structure, and it has different institutions. The court has been delivering quite positive judgments, but this is a question for us as a movement. Do we really want to wait every time for Europe to change in Latvia to come through Europe, or do we want to build it within with a consensus, with something which can bring us together and unite? Talking about how can we do that, it's a lot of the overall themes have been identified already in the previous panel, and for me there are three important items. There is a huge work needs to be done by Mozaīka by building, strengthening, capacitating LGBTI people and the movement within the country. In this regard, I'm sympathizing with sentiments expressed by Cardis in the previous panel that it's, I would say, pathetic, the number of openly LGBTI people in this country. And I know I'm maybe not in a position to say, but because I'm comfortably living outside Latvia, but I was out in '91, so maybe I can take credit for that. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done, because we need to be visible, we need to be heard, we need to take public space, we need to be recognized and seen as full members of the society. We need to work with the political elite. Again, we throw a lot of claims and blames on politicians. Yeah, they don't do that, they don't do like we want, but what do we do for them to deliver this change? This is society we live in, this is a structure, they are the ones who are delivering policies and legislation, and it's our duty as a movement to help and provide them, equip them in terms of the argumentation, in terms of the facts. Information and data is extremely important. That's why for Mozaīka something to look into is a collection of information about what is the daily life of LGBTI people. Collecting data, we were speaking to Yuri before, it's not something exciting for the organizations to do, but this is, if we really want to do evidence-based advocacy, we need to work with data and information. And of course, something which has been mentioned already before is alliance and nurturing and building alliances. LGBT people in their movements alone will not win any victories. The victories will come only from cooperations with allies, developing discourse, and looking back at the context in which we are. because attack is happening in Latvia taking place not just against the LGBTI community. The recent legislation and initiatives there putting in danger something which has been already achieved in terms of sexual reproductive health rights, in terms of the women's rights. So this is a complete need for us to work with all the allies who are in danger, because that's a completely different message that we're sending to the policymakers. And I think the last point, which also been expressed quite strongly by Brian before particularly, and by some members of this panel, is about communication. And this is, for example, what our organization is paying extremely serious attention, because what we're witnessing is that the narratives in Europe are changing, and we are finding ourselves in an uncomfortable situation, because we've been quite comfortable for last 20-25 years in Europe overall, because we were using human rights discourse and argumentation, and we were not challenged on that. But as we see now, the conservative, neo-Nazi organizations, those who oppose equality measures, they are jumping and they're using the same discourse. They're using such instruments as citizens' petitions, etc., etc. They're framing their argumentation against equality within human rights discourse. And the movements, not just LGBTI movement, but many other social movements, in a dangerous situation, we need to be very creative. How do we communicate our message? How we speak to politicians, etc. And I think this is something for the movement in Latvia, but not only in Latvia. It's a big challenge. How do we deliver the message? How do we frame? How are we making our claims relevant to other people, to people who are making decisions, to people who are voting, who are making decisions about life on referendum and elections for this matter. So this is quite a few things. I think there is a mouthful for Mozaīka to work, so thank you.
Thank you, Imre, and all three Juris. You didn't stick to my instructions, any of you, but so there will be less time for questions. But on the other hand, I think all of your interventions were very interesting, and I found quite a lot of sort of hands-on advice, which I saw that Kristīne was kind of taking notes and bringing hopefully to the next board meeting. Mozaīka just got a new board elected just a few days ago with 7 fresh members who will start working on a new strategy. So I think there will be lots of it. The things I heard a lot coming up was talk about communication strategies, also avoiding confrontation, finding perhaps let's call it the Irish way, the winning over hearts and minds of people instead of fighting. Setting our own agenda instead of responding to hateful or aggressive messages, bombarding the parliament, our work with our politicians, of course. Juris Pūce mentioned or said that we haven't tried one of the roads he suggested, which is litigation. Actually, we are doing that. Right now, there is, if I'm not wrong, 5 couples who have gone to the marriage registrar, of course, been rejected, and are now proceeding to court to push their case all the way to the European Court of Human Rights. So we figure that even if it's a long road, then it's possibly still shorter than the legislative road in our case. We also heard about alliance building, of course, to hook up with friends, our heterosexual friends with families. I must say, in our case, from the very beginning, from the very first Pride Parade, our friends have really been there for us. And especially the first years, I would say there was an overwhelming heterosexual presence at our Pride Parades, which we are, of course, very thankful for, because it means a lot, and clearly they are less afraid of speaking up than those who are sitting in the closet. Also about the working with politicians include perhaps a bit boring work, such as collecting data and information, presenting good arguments, well-founded arguments, not just based on emotion, but actually on hardcore facts. Or sit back and wait for Europe to push legislation upon us, but I don't think that's the way we are going about it. Actually, one thing I did not hear from any of you, but which I think is also a possible way, perhaps not for Mozaīka as an organization, but for its members, is to actually join the politicians, become a politician yourself. It's not always that we have to be on the outside. I think this is not an impossible way. Even some years ago, when there was some turbulence in Latvian politics and there was a new party founded, then one of the founders, who is a great friend of Mozaīka, he asked me very bluntly, if you join us, would that kind of attract more voters or scare away more voters? What do you think? So a tough question to ask, but perhaps also that is changing. And then another thing which I don't think I really heard is, but which at least I personally think is very important, I think Maria would agree with me, is to tell a story, and tell the story of not just what's going to happen or the current situation, but about the past, and anchor our existence and our issues in the history of Latvia, because one of the typical perceptions is that this is something very modern, this is something that came to Latvia with Karl Streips or with the European Union or etc. But actually we have stories. We have the history department of University of Latvia who is interested in these stories, who are collecting them. We have stories about trans people in the beginning of the 20th century, about lesbian couples getting married actually, and then so these are, in my mind, very important tools to use to explain to people that this is not something you have to be afraid of, and this is something that's been with us all along. So perhaps another aspect to bring. I hope there are questions out there. I have a few. I think maybe I would just ask one. And I was a bit curious with asking Juris Pūce, but maybe the others also have an answer to give. Because we can see the developments in different countries taking different paths. And if you look at the Nordic countries, in particular Northern Europe perhaps, it's been a slow development over a great number of years. And then we have other countries where more of the ketchup effect, the ketchup bottle, there's nothing, then all of it is suddenly on your plate. So everything happens at the same time. And you skip some steps, like you skip the partnership law, you go directly for marriage equality. So what do you think? What is the Latvian model? What is the mentality of our politicians? Which way? Will we suddenly just wake up with marriage one day, or will we take it step by step?
Not really an easy question to answer, but I would say that, first of all, I think most of the problems we still have with the LGBT rights is basically not because and I totally agree with the previous panel, not because the society as such is very hostile to LGBT rights. There are, of course, people who are very hostile, also within the politicians, but mostly because of the lack of will from the politicians to show leadership. And you actually mentioned in a very beautiful example, to be afraid of LGBT, open LGBT people to join the party because it may create a negative attitude. It's a leadership, a leadership of elites. That's very important in a democratic process. That's why there are political elites to lead, not to be led. And that is one issue. If and I think Ireland is a very good example where they actually moved the same way. For many years, the politicians who actually be afraid of the issue, afraid to be part of it, and then suddenly they are all in favor. They're all in favor. And suddenly everything is and within a year or two, everything is changing. I think for the society as ours, where most of the people actually believe in the fact that they don't know any LGBTI people. They believe that they have never met anybody. Both from the politicians, some of them speculate. Of course, I was totally in favor of our very well-known politician Ivars Lembergs giving his weekly address and saying that there are no LGBT people in Ventspils. And I didn't actually, but I so wanted to send an SMS to Kaspar Zālītis. Lembergs is making hi to you. right now in his weekly press conference. So people actually believe. And then in one instance when the people will get to know that there are people around and they have their own very human problems that they are not able to deal with because the country, the state laws, they don't give their opportunity to solve them. In most cases, they will feel compassion, they will not be afraid anymore. They will feel compassion to that, and at that moment, the politicians will follow.
So ketchup.
That's of course an optimistic way of looking at that. It's on the society, how the fabrics of society are built, and our fabrics, the people are in Latvia mostly they are afraid of change. They are not in favor of that. In most instances, even in very small increments of the change, they feel afraid. And this is just a factor that should be taken into account, worked upon, and I totally agree with Imre when he says 90% of the result I have actually from communication. Thank you.
Okay. So I would like to see some hands in there, some questions from the floor. Yeah. Ah. I sense an Estonian debate.
No rage, no rage. Everybody's friends.
Please speak English, Lisette, at least.
Yes, I will. So my question is to Imre, of course, as my good colleague. Just for context, Imre's party has been in power as a prime minister party for 15 years in Estonia, just so that everybody understand. So my question would be, why in these 15 years the liberals haven't been more progressive in terms of bringing forth the legislation? And then second of all, as you mentioned, why do you oppose people coming to the streets?
Very good questions. Thank you, Lisette. First of all, again, I have to disagree with you. You're saying we are not progressive, but we brought the legislation. Our party's official standpoint is we support the Cohabitation Act. The whole process started with the fact that actually only two parties on the political landscape, my party and Social Democrats, took official standpoint in the society to support the act. It took a lot of convincing within our party and huge fights within the board amongst the members, internal list, to get to that point that official party standpoint would be to support. That was done. And even now, currently in the parliament, there are only very few, for some fundamental religious reasons, don't support it. As you know, the Social Democrats and Reform Party are pro it. Unfortunately, together we only have 40% in the parliament. We still need to overcome this 11 votes to get to 51. But that was the answer to the first question. Second, why, at least in the Baltic region, let's call them, as it's called in Estonian society, gay parades don't work. And the reason is very simple. I don't exclude the gay parades. They work in certain societies. In US, they have been instrumental. Also in several Central European countries where society is big enough, I think it's about the sheer volume. If the society is so big and anonymous, people dare to come to the streets, and actually it's one method of doing that. In small societies like our neighboring states here are, everybody knows everybody, and actually going on a street will cause more pain and destruction. Media will pick it up and portray it as some kind of a freak parade, a freak show. So the issue, the beautiful issue they fight for is destroyed by the media and public opinion, and then everybody feels kind of down. And why is that? Because parades traditionally in our region have been a sign of force. We are used to military parades. In the Soviet time, people were forced on the streets to carry the red slogans and fight for the party. Nobody wanted to be on the parades. It was something against us. It was oppressed on us. And now the notion is still there in people's mind. So if you go to the streets with the rainbow flags, people have the same feelings deep down in their heart, and they feel this is something with the force. They want something, they want to communicate through the force. We have to get our rights. And people just don't get it into the heart. They just reject it. So I think in our region, for that reason, our historical and Soviet background, only way forward is peaceful communication, communicating with your members of parliament. Actually, strangely enough, too little talk, direct talk, one-to-one convincing is made with the members of the community and the politician, actual politicians who they voted for. There is no communication, very little. Only during these last moments when we passed the Communication Act, then all of a sudden people came because it was almost not going through, as you remember. So some members of society came, but it takes personal conviction of people to go and talk to the members of parliament. This is the way forward. And I show you a tool, because as many politicians have to overcome their own fears, in a way, they have to come out of the box of fears they have, that if I sign it, what will happen to me? The good thing is, talk to them about the statistics in Estonia. I made some rough statistics of the former parliament and the current parliament. What I discovered was 2/3 of the people who were standing for the partnership law, who voted for that, they got voted back in the parliament. 2/3 of the one who were pro or against the law, who were fighting against the law, didn't get elected back in, including 3 most prominent opponents of the law. The 3 most vocal ones who stood against the bill didn't get voted back in, so it didn't help them. Somehow society has a self-control mechanism that somebody goes too far in squeezing somebody's rights, they don't find it's right. There is an equilibrium in people's heart where the balance should be. And a good example is what we haven't talked today about at all, and actually nobody even brought it up, is the importance of social media. I bring you an example. The Estonian so-called most vocal and vicious organization fighting against it is the Foundation for Traditional Family Rights, funded by East and West and Christian right-wing organizations. And they came with the petitions to the government and parliament. They made a social network site, started to collect a lot of likes to that. And then all of a sudden, out of the blue, some kind people formed the other social media group called Thank You. Our traditional families don't need protection. And these were mostly heterosexual people who started to like it because they found it was too much what this organization did. And I think these kind of, just to see the balance, the protection of family rights got about 5,000 likes, and the Thank You, as it's called, Thank You community, got almost 20,000 likes. So here was the balance. And then society saw, well, something is not right if somebody so viciously is fighting against somebody's basic rights. And then came a very funny society, which is protection of the traditional medieval values. And that was a kind of a joke community. And that grew very fast too. Every time the traditional family rights made some posting, they made a counter posting with the popes from mid-ages. And that was really funny. And a little bit of humor also helps to break the ice. That's what they also, don't take it too seriously. Of course, it's a serious issue, but sometimes we have to break the ice, especially with politicians, to see that it's a good time to be on your side.
I would agree with your last point about humor. I think that's something that Mozaīka has always carried with it, and perhaps especially thanks to our chair, Kristīne, but setting the tone. But when it comes to Pride Parades, I would like to respond, but I just wonder if there's anyone in the audience who would like to respond to this. I'm looking at some of the people who participated for the first time in EUROPRIDE in Riga last summer.
Hello, my name is Jana. Last year I go to March first time, and a lot of my friends also go the first time on March, and that was very, very big for us all, because we are all sitting in our closets, and one of my friends even says that when we go to the end to parks, she says, "Oh, that's all? Maybe go one more time." And it is very important to go to these marches, and I think it's we didn't get So far, if we didn't have these marches, I remember 2006 march, that was 10 years ago, I was so scared that I didn't go. In 2007, I went to the park, I stand on the street and I look how people go, and I so much want to go there. And if there wasn't this march, nobody was talking about LGBT community in Latvia, and we haven't been here. So I think march is very, very neat thing. Thank you.
And my name is Thomas, and I also was with Jana last year in Riga here. Jana was carrying the Latvian flag, and I was carrying the Lithuanian flag. And I know that this discourse on, convincing and getting our message through is very important. But it's also very important that I'm not begging you my rights. I have my rights as a human being, as a citizen of every country. And marching is one of my rights as the citizen of the country to peacefully assemble with my folks and to enjoy who we are. And the feelings I feel when I march on the main streets, let it be on Vilnius, on Riga, is that I have a community and that I don't fear because I have so many people behind my back. And I think, exactly, and that's, I think, why it's important to march on the streets, just to know that I'm not alone. Thank you.
I think we a little bit perhaps left the topic of the future, although there's an interesting question whether Estonia will have a Pride parade next year or not, since it's their turn, according to our Baltic Pride agreement. Anyway, any other questions, any comments? Yes, here in the front.
Hello. Maybe I'm not going to be so positive because I want to emphasize the fact that compared to Ireland, we lost the case of winning public opinion up to now. If you remember, decriminalization in Latvia happened in '92, in Ireland '93, and then what we had in Ireland you saw in the beginning today, and what we have in Latvia, well, you know about. My question is mostly to the Latvian participants, not only in the panel but also in the audience. What do you think? What kind of slogan or what kind of value we should choose to win the public support? We heard in the case of Ireland it was equality. I wonder if in Latvia it will work because of the citizenship situation, and how it can be viewed from the point of view of citizenship law. But if we speak about the future, what do you think we should emphasize when talking to the general public? Not to politicians, not to other members of LGBT community, but to the others who we want to win if we recognize that we live in a democratic society and we need their support. Thank you very much.
Would you like to respond, Juris?
I will be very short. I think when I speak about the issue of need to pass a Cohabitation Act with the general public, I think the most important arguments are of the human sort, that people suffer because of the fact that they don't have access to something. They need to emigrate because of the fact they want to have their families recognized for one or the other reason. They have real problems when one of them, the cohabiting couple, not registered, gets into some kind of trouble. They suffer, and that's not a theoretical situation. It's actually very practical, and people see it. The problem with that is only one. I personally know some of the examples where people have had actually very big problems because of that. But people don't want to talk about that in public, so it doesn't get into general public's attention as a problem. I actually strongly believe that Latvian society is a very compassionate society. If we see a problem, we can attribute ourselves to that problem. We feel a very strong compassion. We are ready to do a lot of things to help people if it's needed. We see it Imre mentioned social media. In the Facebook there are tens of groups of people, help that person, help that person. It starts from the sick children, ends with the refugees. And each of the group has thousands of followers, people giving their time, money, and so on to help. So I think the best examples for, best arguments for people is actually the people are suffering and we need to help people. And people are emotionally willing to help others. There are, of course, people who don't want to help others, but we cannot touch every single black heart.
Okay. Juris the second has a...
Very quickly, I think the bottom line on a global scale, it's about, just to say something about the Irish campaign, it's not something which happened over 1 year. It's something which happened with years of preparation and years of research. And now this information is becoming in Europe more available. In the United States, for example, behind the marriage equality campaign, there lies 10 years of research and millions of dollars. So at the moment at ilga-europe, I think we have 30,000 euros for 3 years to do research. So it's a first step, but this is something which we're seeing more and more, because every country is different. But the bottom line, that how I would see it, is underlying the common humanity. And this is what Juris already mentioned, because at the moment discourse and narratives in Latvia is very divisive, them and us. And actually both sides are using the same. The opponents of equality, they're constantly demonizing, dehumanizing LGBTI people, but out of self-preservation, it's a natural human reaction. LGBTI movement very often use the same discourse, separating and kind of, when we hold loads of seminars with members throughout Europe, and when we started doing courses on values and training and framing on communication, it was very interesting to observe when we were using some of the posters or examples of what the opponents are using. We would fall into the same habit of kind of, yeah, but they're stupid, they don't understand, and so on and so on. There is a constant bouncing them and us. So we need to go back to this very basic ideals of, not ideals, but reality of common humanity and humanizing the LGBTI people, but also do the same work within the community, because as long as they see them as them and obstacles, we will not progress. So it's a mutual process, and it's not easy. But research and resources, because if I understand, in every country which went through such campaigns like Ireland, there were a lot of researches done on different target population, whether it's men in or urban society over 50s, etc., etc. So it's a very targeted research identifying which messages, which values work and relate to certain particular demographic.
Okay, thank you, Juris. We still have time for some questions. Can I see some? Gabi, I see. Where's the microphone? Pasha,
Perhaps not a question, just a word of encouragement, because you're all sounding very down, and you know, you've survived for 10 years, and that in itself is an achievement in this climate, both social and political, and I think that's something you need to keep reminding yourself of, that as an organization that faces so much public opposition, just to exist is in itself a success, and to find the resources and the people, and you know, the daily grind of actually running a movement, I think, is a huge achievement. You know, change takes time, and you need, I think, to keep believing in what you are trying to achieve. At least that's what keeps me going, is I refuse to believe that I could in any way be treated any less than anyone else. And then, you know, how you frame it. Brian's much nicer than I am, I told you. But, you know, but you have to keep making that point and reminding yourselves of it. This is something we really believe in, because we are human beings, as Yuri said, and therefore, you know, it's not something that can be compromised upon. And eventually, you know, I'm pretty sure everyone will come along, just because we've seen the successes in other countries have led other countries along. And we can look at Italy recently, for example, there, which, you know, and the argument there was everyone else in Western Europe has already done this. We can't be left behind. And, you know, I'm pretty sure your turn will come too. So.
Once we are alone together with Russia, we will finally. Imre has a comment.
Yes, I totally agree that some positiveness is needed here in this audience and also in all 3 Baltic states. And take the Brian's example in the morning. Look how many positive emotions came from that. And it's all actually in our hands. I totally agree we have a fundamental human right to march and do that. But let's always think how the other side would see that. If we just want to declare, yes, and I agree, we need to do that, but if the other side sees something else in it, then at the end we want to win their support. So let's be clever, and as Brian said, let's see it always from the other side and see how they would accept the situation, how it would touch their hearts, as it touches our hearts. How to put it this way, to communicate this message to them. And that's why I'm talking all day here about the communication. It's all in how we say it, how we do it, and how do we win their hearts. Talk to your politicians kindly. Going to politicians and saying, we demand our rights, will not work. Nothing will change. But winning them over, we support you, you support us, we do it together. That's the way forward. Otherwise, Kennedy wouldn't have said, ask what not the country has done for you, but what you have done for your country, and how it's done is the most important thing. I'm telling you that we are in Estonia, as where we are today, still a long way to go, but 40% out of 100, only 42 already, because we have realized that the strong bridge between the civil society and politicians and working together in tandem is the only way forward. Just demanding the rights will not get us the end result. Yeah, it will get our message out, but it will not win the hearts. So only way to do it is to do it together with the politicians and convince them with the same tools as I gave you. It doesn't end your career if you support it, but you have to give them good reasons why it's good for the country, why it's good for the future for all of us.
You say from 0 to 40, actually. That's your
42.
42. Juris also has a brief comment.
Yeah, very comment. I don't want to be antagonistic, just to challenge Imre you slightly. I think I would not want this conference to end up on a note that pride is actually counterproductive.
Definitely not.
I think it's important to approach it very holistically. I totally get that people might be upset about it, but upset sometimes is good. But the event of the Pride has so many dimensions. And in Latvian context, Mozaīka been set up because 2 silly young men started the whole movement without thinking. So we rushed into saving the situation. But actually working with the Pride, but intelligently throughout it, there was an increase in support within the LGBTI community. Every year we have people who are coming back to Mozaīka because they've seen, because they've heard that something is happening. And last year I wasn't able to come to Riga for the EUROPRIDE, but I was watching a web stream, and I was amazed how many straight people came out and the reasoning behind what was behind their support. So I think it's important that indeed it's a lot about communication and framing how we go about it, but there are a lot of fundamentals which cannot be discarded. And actually, at least in Latvian case, I think Pride proved to be as a very useful tool. Yes, it caused a lot of discussion, but actually all these discussions and steering this issue brought up so much positivity, and the degree of the debate we had in Latvia after the Pride uncomparable to many years of attempts before of activists.
So I need to respond, just 30 seconds. Don't misunderstand me. Pride is extremely important, and that has to be carried on. What I'm talking about here is this one part of the whole Pride activities. That's parade on the street. I mean, since the parade was cancelled in Estonia and we started to do it as a festival with a big concert, different events, still the flags, the famous artists in Estonia contributed, they came on the stage, they stood for equality, all these things happen still. Just in Estonia, the parade on the streets was cancelled because that was connected to the Soviet time part.
But parades have to continue.
Juris.
Pride has to continue.
A very, very brief comment from you.
Just 40 seconds. I think because
30.
it's very interesting discussion, and I understand why in Estonia it is so heated upon. For me, the EUROPRIDE was the first Pride parade I actually participated. And it's actually for me, it was an interesting. I'm a straight white guy with 2 children, married with wife, and when people and I actually thought around a month prior to the parade, I need to go, and I said to my wife, well, we should most probably plan to go. She said, I know, I already for 2 months in my NGO we are planning a group. She heads an cultural NGO. We are having a group of people, and there are tens of them already signed up. And I said, oh, I'm something missing. And it felt wonderful, actually, in that day. It was a warm day, very, very good day. A lot of very positive people. Some, 2 or 3, not very positive people around then. And I thought, for me, it was a wonderful experience of being together with a lot of smiling, happy people, and also some couple of 100 rainbow flags. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all of my... I'm sorry, Carlis, I have to close because I want to give the last minute to myself. And you are on television every day, so sorry. Just also on the happy note, when I went to the first Ilga-Europe conference, I visited the first Ilga-Europe conference, and my experience was in Bulgaria, in Sofia in 2006. And there was already then, 10 years ago, elderly Swedish lesbian woman who had been an activist already in the 60s in Sweden. And I said to her that, you know, when you listen to the rhetoric here and all of Eastern Europe coming and crying, and you must have heard this such a long time ago already for so many decades, you know, are you not getting tired of this? You know, how do you feel? And she said, well, actually, no, and the thing I'm thinking about is that when we started in Sweden and Denmark and a few other countries in the 60s, nobody in the entire world thought this is possible. Nobody had ever even talked about marriage or cohabitation or adoption, any of these issues. We were in the dark. We were heading for something we believed in, and nobody else was on our side. You have all our countries to look at. You know the answer. You know where you're going. You have a roadmap. You have so many supporters, so it's going to be so much quicker for you. This is what she said 10 years ago, and I really would like to believe that, and it is true. Of course, the power of also, as Gabi mentioned, in Italy is suddenly feeling they're the only ones in Western Europe. Soon we, will be the only ones in Eastern Europe, and this has a great power. And just to sum up then what we have heard here, because the whole purpose of this conference and this panel was to give Mozaīka some guidelines for the next 10 years. I can try to summarize that what Mozaīka we need to be is compassionate and clever communicators and litigators with great connections with politicians from the whole spectrum of the political spectrum, as well as with great friends among heterosexual family people and cultural workers and others. We also need to be excellent, skillful data collectors to bring this message to the policymakers. We need to be wonderful researchers and activists going out in the streets with a great sense of humor. And now I give the floor to Kristīne.
Don't get too happy. It's not the end yet. Just to briefly close the day. Thank you all for coming. I think it was very, very, very interesting discussion. You never had a chance to win this because there's a lot of Pride organizers in the room. That's maybe a bit unfair, but it's a topic worth of a separate conference. How we use Pride as a tool. So that's a completely different but very interesting conversation, which we probably might have at another day, another conference. But I would like to ask Yuri, one of the three, to maybe give his final comments and summarizing on Latvia's maybe not so much obligations as opportunities. How do you see that?
Well, I think in order to do that, I want to start with looking at the neighbors, which is now a little bit confusing since we've learned a lot today about conspiracies and deals in Estonia, and whether or not in the end pride parades are good in Estonia, or are they going to come. I think there is some sentiment in the room that they might. But I do want to look at Estonia from a human rights perspective as a neighboring country that has made a small step forward. And it was said this morning that it was from 0 to 0.1. I think I can give Estonia a little bit more credit there. And I also hope that the work you have been able to do, you with your colleagues, can serve as an inspiration for policymakers in Latvia, in Lithuania, and in other countries. If I go a country on the other side to Lithuania, I think we've also heard that in terms of legal protection, there is still a lot of work need to be done in Lithuania. I have understood that the Lithuanian government is interested in working with the Council of Europe on looking to amend some policies and some legal documents, some legal texts, and we as Council of Europe are very happy to be able to provide that assistance to the government. And I think that also brings me back to Latvia. As I mentioned, with Mozaīka, with academia, and with the government, we have supported changes here in the past. We as Council of Europe are ready to continue that support to the Latvian government. However, it does need to express the need for that support. And whether the government is going to do that or not does not depend on us. I think that depends on, to a certain extent, to the people here in the room, to the journalists, to the opinion makers, to the human rights activists, to the officials, and that would provide work, not just for us, but for all of us, that needs to be done in the future to make sure that Latvia gets out of this lower range of ilga-europe's index. And if I look around the room, I think the majority of people here agree that it is time for Latvia to move out of that part of the index. And as I said, we would be, as a Council of Europe, very happy to support the government in taking that steps.
Thank you, Yuri. I think what we heard today, there are two words that at least sit in my memory. One is leadership, and that relates to politicians and to us in a way, in working and talking to politicians. So political leadership, and the other one is community. Community, community, community. So that's, we keep repeating that, and it is up to all of us to make that change happen. And I think, to answer Linda's earlier question, we want to be catch-up. We do, and I think because so many countries have done that before, we can actually skip a few steps, because it's been done so many times in the last decades when this struggle have been going on. So I think we definitely do want to have that catch-up effect in Latvia. It's probably time for that. Maybe not this year, of course, but pretty soon. So yes, leadership, community, and I think it's an opportunity. If we talk about opportunities for Latvia, which always quickly turn into challenges, I think it's a big opportunity for the LGBT community to make a real change by being visible, by coming out, by coming to Pride or not coming to Pride, by being themselves with their families, with their friends, with their colleagues. We keep talking about it, but an LGBT organization alone cannot do, cannot achieve what the visible, strong community can achieve. So it's all up to LGBT community from this point on to speed up the process. Of course, we'll be working on that too, but without the community, it will be increasingly difficult to speed up this change. So that would be my concluding words, and I really want to thank everybody, people at the back, all the volunteers, all my fellow board members who helped to put this together. Thank you very much. Thank you. Now it's the end.
Well, somebody has to say something about Mozaīka, and I have a story to tell you. My contact with Mozaīka was, you know when? 1994. Some of you haven't been born even yet. So it's 22 years ago. I produced the first ever same-sex issues dealing documentary. It was called Coming Out of the Iron Closet, and I came here to Riga to interview the people from Mozaīka. Actually, we have some of the heroes of the film sitting here in the audience too. Carlis was one of them. This film won many international documentary film festivals. It told so much about what the gay community in Latvia is doing. Also in Estonia and in Russia, it was about 3 Baltic states and what happens behind then the iron closet, and how people are coming out mentally of this state. And I just want to say that what Mozaīka has done over these years has reached far beyond the Latvian borders, and you are known already around the world. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. That was very nice closing. Thank you so much.
The gypsy doodle is the thing that we wear. The gypsy doodle will get in your hair. And if you catch it, it couldn't be worse. The things you say will come out in reverse.